Hey, this is episode number 48 of Gen X Amplified, and this is another special best of episode and one of my favorite conversations, my interview with Jay Papasan, who is the co-author of one of the most groundbreaking business, leadership, and self-help books in recent years, the book titled The One Thing. All right, so are you ready? Let's do it.
So make your choice and make the choice from your heart about what matters most, and then pursue that with vigor and passion and diligence, and then extraordinary things really start to happen.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the podcast dedicated to empowering and helping Gen X and mid-career professionals and leaders to help us unlock our inner power so we can maximize our impact and succeed in life. As always, thank you so much for your attention, for allowing me in your earbuds once again for another week. And thank you so much for your download and for listening and for sharing and promoting the podcast, and not just the podcast, but the movement, the movement. So again, thank you as always. And today is another best of episode, another one of my favorites, which I feel is so applicable to this day. And that's why I picked this episode to republish, to replay, because this episode is all about focus, and the fact that we need to focus more. We need to focus more on our goals, on our tasks, and we have to start eliminating the bad, what I call it, the evils of multitasking. That's right. I said it, multitasking, because I am a quote unquote multitasker. I've been prone to try to tackle so many things that I need to get done at the same time, to tackle them at the same time, I should say. And a lot of times I am still stuck. Or further behind from my goals that I want to accomplish. And my guest is the co-author of one of the most groundbreaking, cornerstone, flagship, all of those big adjectives, one of the most groundbreaking books I've ever read, and a lot of people have read in recent years, that has to do with business, leadership, self-help. This book is titled The One Thing. And if you have not read this book, and if you haven't heard of this book, it is fascinating. And the co-author is Jay Papasan. He wrote this book along with distinguished author Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, the co-authors of The One Thing. And the subtitle is The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results. So this book is about, I think it's about maybe 4 years, maybe 3 to 4 years old, maybe 4 to 5 years old. And it has changed so many lives. And I tell you, it has changed my life when it comes to really thinking about, how do I accomplish my most important goal of the day, of the week, of the month, of the year? And how do I get that done? And the key takeaway from this book to help you do that is you need to focus on the one thing that matters most at that time. And if you do that, everything else, all of your other goals, all of your other tasks will be easier. And there's a question, there's a thing that they call the focusing question that you should ask yourself every day, especially in the morning when you wake up. It's called the focusing question. And that question is, what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. And they go into more detail in the book, but I tell you, that question is a powerful question. And the reason I feel that this is so applicable, not only to this audience, but also today's time, because we as Gen Xers, as mid-career professionals, we are very, very busy. We are tackling work. Some of us are tackling trying to own and grow a business. We're tackling our family lives, responsibilities. All of these different dynamics are coming at us. And at the same time, we are continuing to focus on creating more impact, to accelerating our career, to succeeding in life. And how do we juggle all of these tasks at the same time, remain focused and remain steadfast toward our goals? Well, the answer, according to this book, is to try to not to embrace multitasking so many different items, but to pick that one thing that is the most important thing at that time that will help you not only accomplish that goal that's in front of you, but accomplish all of your other goals and tasks that you have. So anyway, that's my little preamble. I wanted to set this up, but definitely enjoy this conversation with Jay Papasan, the co-author of the groundbreaking book, the #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, New York Times bestseller, #1 Amazon bestseller, USA Today bestseller. This book is groundbreaking. Check it out. My interview, my conversation with fellow Gen Xer, Jay Papasan, co-author of The One Thing. Check it out. So today, our theme is all about focus, not multitasking, but focus. And you will hear why, because my featured guest today is the Vice President of Publishing and Executive Editor at Keller Inc., the publishing arm of Keller Williams Realty. He is best known for co-writing with Gary Keller a few best-selling books, including The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which became a New York Times bestseller. But their most recent book, titled The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results, has been nothing short of a game changer. Believe me. It is also a New York Times bestseller and has reached #1 on the Wall Street Journal business bestseller list. Everyone, please welcome today's Gen Exceptional guest, Jay Papasan. Jay, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm super excited to be here.
Likewise, and I am excited as well, and especially when I found out through my research that you are a fellow Memphian, like
That's
myself.
Right. I even went to Tiger High, if you know what I'm talking about.
Tiger, I did too at Tiger High. That is exactly what we called it back in the day. I'm a proud Tiger, you know.
I am too. It was Memphis State when I started, and it was University of Memphis when I finished.
Oh wow! So that was right around my time. I was there during the Penny Hardaway days, and you know, I was right there, and Billy Smith, and I was even there when we beat Peyton Manning, Tennessee. I don't know if you remember that game in football. It was a crazy game.
I'm aware of that game. I cannot confess to have been attending it because I think I went to like 2 football games. It wasn't always a lot to root for.
I know. But it's always great to meet a fellow Memphian. And even beyond that, I am really, really excited because we're going to talk about something that is really important to me and I'm sure very important to our listeners, all about focus and multitasking and this awesome book. And I tell you, I feel there are a few books that are watershed publications for different reasons. You know, when I think about Good to Great by Jim Collins or Tribes by Seth Godin, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, these are all books that I'm passionate about, but they deal with mindset and changing, which I feel is the root of success. And, you know, and I put The One Thing firmly in that category. So wow. I am so thrilled to really dig into the meat of the book. But Jay, before we do that, and before we really unpack the wonders of the book, I would love for you to briefly take us back and talk about your journey, because, you know, part of the mission of this podcast, Jay, is to empower and inspire others through storytelling, especially with aspiring entrepreneurs. And your personal journey, I think, will be very fruitful. So if you can just briefly talk about your journey as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and then transition into what was that defining transformational moment that facilitated you and Gary to write this fascinating book, The One Thing?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for including our book with such great company. That's awesome. We spent almost 5 years on the book, kind of, sequestered away from the world to focus on it. And when you hear that it's having an impact, I never get tired of hearing that. So thank you.
My pleasure.
My journey as a writer, which is kind of my one thing, obviously, and how that's led me into business. I tried to write my first book when I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
I borrowed my mom's typewriter. It was an electric typewriter, which dates me. Put it on like a card table in my bedroom and proceeded to try to rip off The Hobbit. I don't know. I just knew I loved books.
Right.
I didn't really have any confidence that I was going to be an author, though. I wrote stories in high school. Got an English degree with creative writing at Memphis State. Went on, got a graduate degree after working overseas for a while in creative writing, and ended up working in publishing. And the way I kind of like to talk about it is that, one of the metaphors in the book, we talk about the writer and the elephant, and it's from a book called The Happiness Hypothesis.
Okay.
And the writer, right, is your brain. It's this little kid that's riding an elephant through the jungle. And no matter what he does, the elephant is actually in control. The elephant is just agreeing to go along. And, mentally, I was saying I love books. I love to be around books. But my heart really wanted me to be on the other side of the fence.
Okay.
And it just kept leading me. Like I worked in bookstores to make ends meet in college. I mean, I was always around it, even though I was never articulating, I'm going to be a writer. And I look back on that and I'm like, gosh, why did it take me 30 years to figure it out? But I ended up moving to Austin, Texas with my wife, who I met in New York after being an editor there. And there was no editorial jobs here.
Okay.
And I remember my wife saying, well, you should just become a writer. And kind of a pivotal moment for me, a milestone for me, was she had a friend from out of town that was coming to visit her in Austin. And she said, you'll like him, he's a writer. And so I was really looking forward to meeting this character. We met at Shady Grove. We sat in a booth. I can remember exactly where it all took place. And I said, so I hear you're a writer. Tell me about that. What do you write? And he goes, well, have I read anything you've written? He'd never been published, magazine, online, anything. His day job was like a delivery guy at FedEx.
Wow.
But his identity was as a writer, because that's what he did.
Okay.
That's who he was. And I remember riding home with my wife, and I was really struggling. And she's like, no, it's not about your title. It's not about how you earn your paychecks. It's about who you are. And I'm paraphrasing. She's a wise woman, and that's what I hear today. And it was weird. After that point forward, my self-identity became that of a writer. And I started talking and acting differently. And it was like, I don't know. It seems like it was the next day. I know it was probably a year later. I saw a designer at this little real estate franchise company where I was working on a newsletter, and he was clearly working on a book cover. And I thought he was freelancing his work at work. And I asked him about it. He goes, oh, didn't you hear it? Gary Keller and Dave Jinks are writing a book. And at that time, Gary Keller's the founder of the company,
right,
and Dave Jinks was the guy who was running our internal university. And so I ran into Gary Keller in the bathroom. And I said, hey, I hear you're writing a book. Do you remember I used to work at HarperCollins? And he had no memory of that. But he invited me in his office and laid out a vision for writing 13 books. And he started pitching them to me. And he said, we went to the bookstore for almost 2 days, and we picked our 5 favorite books, kind of like your list, our favorite how-to business books. And it was The Good to Great, The Millionaire Next Door, Mia Hamm's Go for the Goal, Body for Life, and a 5th book I can honestly never remember. But 2 of those books were books I'd edited at HarperCollins. I'd done Body for Life and Mia Hamm's Go for the Goal. And I showed him my name in that, and we were pretty much off and running. Within a month, I was officed outside of his door, and for the next 3.5 months, we were writing our first book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which is a career guide for building a business in real estate, and that's sold almost 1 million copies now.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that it was like a little niche book that hit the right note at the right time, and that launched our partnership. And I credit my partnership with him, he's been my coach, my mentor, my boss, and my partner, all depending on what time of day it is. But he has definitely taught my wife and I how to think bigger and how to think like business people. And so I owe a lot of that to him. So that's my 5-minute, 6-minute journey, maybe more detailed than you wanted, but that's kind of it. I had to identify as a writer before I could become one. And it was strange. In becoming a writer, I met the mentor who would turn me into a business person.
Wow. No, that was not too much detail. That was actually great information and very inspiring, you know, and I was listening to your story and you talk about pivotal moments. So, you know, just taking a step back and listening to you, you know, what stuck out to me is that you said that you started to identify yourself as a writer
and believe it.
And that was all kudos to your I'm sure your lovely wife. What's her name?
Wendy.
To Wendy. So you met this guy in this booth at Shady Grove, and you know he wasn't a writer by trade, correct? But
by any conventional definition,
right.
He wasn't published anywhere.
Okay. And so that inspired you, and you from that moment on, including the conversation you had with your wife, it's like, look, I can charter my own future just by a belief system, and a lot of people fail to do that, and I've been guilty of that as well. So I think that that's a powerful story because we're sitting here talking about this awesome book that we're going to get into, and then during that journey you met Gary Keller you met, and as you said, he's been your coach, your mentor, your partner, and also that vision that you said he laid out 13 books. I mean, he didn't ramp up with Jay. Okay, we're going to start with 5. He from the gate, was it 13 books?
He had a vision for 13 books that were part of a larger series, and we've written 12 so far.
Okay.
Either partnered with someone to create it or done it ourselves. So a lot of that vision is coming together, and of course, you know, having worked together for that long, we've got more on the way.
Okay.
So we've been fairly prolific as it goes for someone who's the chairman of the board of what's now the #1 real estate company in the world. You know, that's his day job. You know, I'm a vice president in his real estate company, and we both actively block our time, which we can talk about when we talk about the one thing, so that we're doing our one thing, which is to create the next book.
Right. Okay. So let's go right into that. So you write you guys write the first book, which was definitely a bestseller, and The Millionaire Real Estate Investor.
Right.
And then, so how did the one thing germinate? Can you just illustrate for us, you know, how did that idea spark and what was that process like?
At the time, our old writing partner, Dave, this is before he retired, was still there. And I can remember we were working actually on a real estate course. The one thing for most small business people is lead generation, marketing and prospecting.
Right.
And we were developing a course that would have activities that would help people in 3 months kind of get their business really ramped up.
Right.
And it was all about lead generation. And it was, I think, technically done well. You know, we were writing it almost like a book, but for our industry. And we'd done all the research, but it didn't have pizzazz. And I remember Gary saying, you know what, I know we have to get this out. Let me take it home for the weekend. I'm going to write a new introduction. And he came back and he had written a short essay, maybe 10 pages, called The Power of One. And this would have been 2007, I don't know, about 2007. And I looked at that, and you know, I'd worked in publishing for 5 or 6 years at HarperCollins. I'd done some big books, and I just immediately had this publishing, you know, big ahas, like, this is Gary's Good to Great. I'd worked with him long enough to understand that as smart as he is, it's not incumbent on him to be the smartest guy in the room. You know, he almost always tries to find people smarter than him. He works hard, but he doesn't work long hours. It's like there's a lot of superlatives you could throw at him, but those aren't what made him the business person he's become. The thing that he does really better than anyone else is he identifies the #1 priority, and he'll give it more time than anyone else.
Okay.
And that's really simple in concept and hard in execution. And because you've tried, I'm sure, tried to start a new diet and really, you know, acquiring habits and focusing on your one thing is simple in concept, hard in execution. And I was like, wow,
yes.
This guy that is what he does. That is completely genuine to him. And we were off to the races. The irony I like to share with people is that the market crashed. And so even though we were in the middle of writing a book on focus, we did get distracted, and we wrote a book called Shift, which is how to deal with the big market shift, in about 4 months, right in the middle of that. So the 5 months it was contiguous, but it wasn't continuous.
Wow. And now when he presented this idea of was the power of one,
Right.
What was your initial thought? I mean, how did you feel? What was going through your mind? Like, how did you embrace the concept of it?
We knew it was needed. I mean, it was weird. And this is that was the year that the iPhone came out. I mean, and you probably saw it in the book, we've done research that the whole idea of work-life balance is very new. And the idea of that as a phrase didn't even appear until the 80s.
That's true.
And it peaked in 2007, right when we were having this idea. There were never more articles written about work-life balance or the lack thereof. And a lot of it was because all the borders in our life fell away. I remember when if you wanted to work from home, I had to go and plug in the modem and fire it up, and that would take a few minutes. You could go start a cup of coffee. And, then you might have to fire up the actual computer, which might take a few minutes to go. I mean, it was a big decision to get on your email at home.
Oh, yes.
And then all of a sudden you had a BlackBerry, and then you have an iPhone, and you can be at work all the time. And so people were multitasking, and they were very distracted, and they were very stressed, and they were trying to do too much and overbooked and over opportunities. Even it wasn't all negative stuff. It was almost too much good stuff.
Oh, multitasking was celebrated. I mean, celebrated. Yeah. I've experienced it. I mean, if you did not portray that idea or that that look that you were multitasking, then you were deemed as someone that was a slacker.
Oh, it's so in vogue. I think I wrote about it in the book. We would periodically Google how to be better at multitasking as a phrase.
Yep.
And it went from 1 million results to 3.5 million over the course of writing the book. It just kept getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
Entrepreneur, Inc., Fast Company, they're all writing articles and saying that this is very real. So all around us, when we wrote a quick outline, here's what we think the myths or the lies about productivity are, and multitasking was one of them. And here's what we think the thieves are. And we kind of came up with those themes, and it was all around us. So I just think that we were getting a lot of evidence from it was written for business people. But I was looking at all the business people in my life, and they were not suffering per se, but they weren't really in a great place. And we felt like this book was definitely an approach to making better decisions that we could give them.
No, it's definitely is. Now I was going to say was, but is something. And I know and I'll just say my personal story. When I first heard about the book, it was, I believe, and it is weird. It all happened literally at once. And I know the book has been out for a year or two, right?
We actually launched it in 2013.
Right.
And, we obviously peaked during the launch.
Right.
And then sometime last summer, almost a year ago exactly, sales started trending up, which is very, very strange in our industry. We weren't really doing anything differently from the marketing standpoint, but I think there was some sort of word of mouth germinating. We're up last month, August over August, I think we were up 47%. And I mean, hovering on breaking back onto the bestseller list again. So something culminating out there, and it's jiving with people, I guess. Yeah,
no, that's what I was going to say about my personal story. I first heard about the book. It was, I believe, late last year through podcasts. Actually, before I launched my own, I'm an avid podcast listener. I love the medium, and I started to really hear this groundswell of this book, The One Thing. And the reason I gravitated toward it because, Jay, I always had a struggle with multitasking, and I am that shiny object syndrome, man. It is isn't that the first step in every kind of behavior change? Hello, my name is Jay Papasan. I know my name is Adrian, and I am and I say this, humbly, that it's something that I struggled with. And so I started to hear about this book, and I quickly, I heard about it and I said, oh, okay, let me see. And then I finally got a chance to read it. And then I also downloaded it because I'm a big audiobook guy, and I fell in love with the book, and I felt that it spoke to me. And I'm like, Jay and Gary, they must have had my picture on the wall while they were writing this book. And you're an entrepreneur. That's the picture we had on the wall. And that's classic. Exactly. Classic. Yeah. And the reason I was I brought up the year that it was initially published, because you're right. I'm starting to see this constant groundswell, and it's germinating all over the place. And it's like, this thing has been out for a couple of years, but for some reason it's just taken on this new life. And when I read it, I thought this, and I mentioned this in introduction of the show, is that when I think about those books, for me, and not just for me, but like the Good to Greats, the Tribes, the Start with Whys, even Crush It with Vaynerchuk, which is another guy that I absolutely love and think is awesome, that really did it for me when it comes to social media and building a brand. Those books were transformational, and it dealt with those emotional, visceral struggles that a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs or even leaders in the corporate world, that they have to manage a team, and especially Gen Xers, which we're going to get into as well because of the age and the things that we're dealing with our daily lives. I felt that it was so timely. So that was that. And so I was curious just to hear from you, which you did, articulate, when you start to see this, I guess, this part 2 of the embracing of the book, I wonder, how does that feel? Like, what you and Gary, when you guys are talking about the book, like, what do you think about it, that all of a sudden it's taken on this new life?
We were super proud of where it went. I mean, in 2013, our publisher likes to say we were the #1 best-selling business book not called Lean In. And that's just the truth, right? God bless her.
I know, Cheryl.
She wrote an amazing book,
right,
and the timing was there. And she also has something called Facebook behind her. God bless her.
Oh, yeah.
So, but we were really happy with our results. And if it hadn't had this resurgence, I don't think we would have any regrets.
Okay.
But what I love is that there is this long tail that leads me to believe that it has a chance of sticking around. Most books show up and then fade away in a really big way. And I do believe now, when we talk to the people at Barnes & Noble, when we talk to the people at Hudson's bookstore, they want to keep it stacked up. And that's very unusual. And to me, that would be the greatest honor in the world as for my career path, to have that book kind of become, like you're suggesting it might be becoming, I don't want to jinx it, knock on wood, it might become something of a business classic.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, it's resonating outside of the business world. I think so many people today, because of all the opportunities and obligations we feel, especially a lot of Gen Xers at this time in our lives. We not only have kids, but we may have aging parents. If you're starting to feel tugged in multiple directions, I think this book resonates. One of your fellow podcasters, Jess Lively, who was a friend of mine here in Austin, she put it out to her audience, and working moms just jumped all over it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just, I was like, oh, well, of course, right? I wasn't necessarily thinking of that, even though I often look to my wife for inspiration, and she is someone I'm writing to when I'm writing with Gary. But boy, yeah, they're working moms, personal trainers, like all these different groups started showing up and really adopting it. So very satisfying. I'm very proud of that. It was a team effort for sure, but I want to have an impact. That's part of my life mission. And that's why you write books. I think that's one of the better motivations. As someone who used to be an editor, I used to hear a lot of vanity too. But I know Gary truly wants to help people change their lives, to change behavior. And I do too. And so we measure that in book sales, because that's the easiest way to know how many lives we're hitting. But boy, that's what a great opportunity for us to reach even more people.
No, I agree. So let's continue to change those lives and just really unpack the premise of the one thing. So if you can just, I guess, in the end of the day, just what is the one thing?
To give you kind of the ultimate Cliff Note summary, to me, when I go out and maybe give a keynote, the thing I'm trying to get to the heart of is, if you can identify an area of your life that you're wanting to be extraordinary, not just average, extraordinary. Maybe it's your family life, maybe it's your work life. You identify your one thing, and ultimately you take that one thing and make it habitual, right? You work for the habit until the habit works for you. And we have a framework around how to do that. But you see it in the lives of really amazing, successful people. How many hours, I read something that Joe Montana would throw like 10,000 football passes for every one pass he would throw in a football game. And so clearly, I mean, competitive practice was something that raised him to elite status, and he just didn't miss it. He just did it. He threw those balls every day, long after most people would have said, you can skip practice, buddy. And that shows up in the lives of coders and the lives of entrepreneurs. And whatever their one thing is, they give it disproportionate time and priority in their life. And so that's the big idea. And our belief, and there's a fair amount of research that we think supports it, is that when you identify your one thing and you hammer away at it over time, you can enjoy what we call the domino effect. And it's this idea that, you know, if you line up your dominoes like you do when you're a kid, you can do one thing and it creates many outcomes, right? It'll knock over many more dominoes.
Right.
And we share in the book, if you remember, that there's a group in the Netherlands that figured out how to line up so many that one domino would knock over 4.5 million dominoes. And then we also found an article from a physicist who said a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, and a 3-inch domino can knock over a 4.5-inch domino, that they can actually get 50% larger all the way down. And so it creates a geometric progression. And in the book, and I can't remember, it's in one of the first chapters, we draw out a theoretical line of dominoes growing at that pace.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And by the 23rd, it's that 2-inch domino would knock over one bigger than the Eiffel Tower.
Right.
By the 31st, it would be knocking over one 3,000 feet higher than Everest. And before you got to 60, it would reach all the way from the Earth to the moon. And it looks like a hockey stick on its side. And if you could just imagine that, you know, with the stick part pointing up, it's flat until it grows so fast you almost can't believe it. That is really the more people we've studied who've built amazing companies, who've built amazing careers, that's kind of the arc. It looks like nothing's happening. 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 And then pow, things start happening so fast you can barely control it. And that's when we say they were an overnight success, and I'm making huge air quotes on this side.
Right.
They're only an overnight success in our minds because that's how we became aware of them. They shot onto the scene, but in almost every single example, they were building something for a long time behind the scenes.
Right.
And I think understanding that sets our expectations about how to seek it in our lives, in our marriage, in our business, in our profession. So that's the big high level. I'm happy to go in deep anywhere you want to go, man.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I was actually going to ask you to start with that big idea, the domino idea, which I thought was fascinating. And it's funny, I mentioned, because I'm a big audiobook guy, and I got the audiobook, and then I heard about all the great illustrations you had in the written book. I said, you know what? All right, I have to double down and just get the book too, because I was missing out on all the great illustrations. But no, the domino effect, I think, is something when you see it and you read it, and even the way that you've articulated in this interview, it all makes sense. But there are a lot of people that I feel are hesitant or feel like, especially in this current culture of immediate gratification and the need and desire to see results right now. Like how would you coach someone or talk to that person that says, well, it's hard for me to think, 5 years ahead or 5 weeks ahead. And I don't want to use just a small domino. I want to go after the Eiffel Tower. And I feel that's going to get me a faster result. Like, how do you get them to embrace this domino idea?
Well, it's the idea of embracing the journey, and that a lot of the joy, and we write about this towards the end of the book, is in the getting closer to your goals and not actually even achieving them. So, I mean, if I was talking to my son, and it's funny, this is like a lesson that I've had with my son and my daughter, and they get it because we can talk about the dominoes.
Right. It's
about developing the habit of seeking mastery. And I don't care if you're talking about, Jay-Z to, Peyton Manning to whoever it is, right?
Right.
They're all, if you look at their lives, extraordinary people do this. There's just no arguing with it. The only out I give people is like, if you want average success or quick success, not extraordinary success, because those are different things. You can go do it pretty much anything you want. Cheating is allowed, but if you're choosing an extraordinary life, there aren't as many choices. And so I just first start there. Let's go ahead. I would love to act as if I could know everything, have everything, and do everything. The reality is, life is way too complex for me to know everything. And I'm the kid that tried to memorize the Trivial Pursuit tiles, right? I did want to. Not going to happen. I can't have everything. No matter how much money you have, you'll have to make choices because the world's too abundant.
Right.
And the big one, and this is where we all cheat and we fudge, is we can't do everything. We don't have enough time. Mm-hmm. And that didn't really sink home for me until my kids were 4 and 5. My wife was launching her business. We were doing this book. And Gary asked me in the writing room, he goes, so where are y'all going to spring break this year? And I shared with him that we kind of confessed to him that we were going to do a staycation and just hang out in Austin. Mm-hmm. And I remember him digesting that without a lot of judgment and just said, Jay, you realize that you only have about 10 spring breaks left with your kids. And I remember I reacted with almost anger. I mean, I got a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old at that time. I was like, what do you mean only 10 left? Like they're going to die or something. I didn't know what he was insinuating.
Right.
And he's like, no, Jay, it's just going to change. This idea of Jay, Wendy, Gus, and Veronica going on spring break together. When Gus is about 15, maybe before, if you're lucky, a little later, he's going to want to bring friends, maybe a girlfriend, maybe a best friend, or he's going to want to go with them. So this idea of the family unit that you love and are so passionate about, going on a big vacation, you got about 10 of those left. That's just the reality. And he said it with a ton of compassion because he could tell it was hitting me right through the heart.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm like, 10? And he goes, so you got 10 left. How are you going to use them? And so there's this moment where we realize I can't do everything. The shortcuts don't matter as much because I really do have to make choices, and it matters. The choices I make matter a lot. So like the next year, like we went to Disney. The next year we went to Costa Rica. We were asking the question, what's the one place we can go to with our kids for spring break at this time in their lives that would be the most meaningful for them and for us? We asked a much more important question because we understood that. And so I look at that domino run and I say, if you get away with cheating, awesome, good for you. I'm not going to plan for it. I'm going to plan for a really huge life. And if what I know is that it'll surprise me how fast it'll happen if I just stay focused on my one thing. And so I just try to encourage people to get their head down. And if they stick to it, it's going to surprise them how big it gets and how fast it gets big. 5 years seems like a long time. It'll happen in a blink of the eye.
Wow, that that story actually struck me through the heart because I have a 6-year-old son, and all right, so next year we're not doing a staycation. I'm already gonna.
There we go. If I helped you, that's great.
That's great. That story was but that's what's great about stories and what's great about this book and what's great about your illustration because I have a 6-year-old son, Cameron, and you're right. It's like I would have before I had this conversation with you. I probably would have thought, oh, come on, I have at least 20 spring breaks or 15. No, when he is like, it's around the same age as your son, he's going to be thinking about, and I hate thinking about that, girls and friends and buddies. You're right.
It'll be different. It won't be bad per se, but it'll be different.
Yes.
And there is something really special about what you have now. And so hopefully, and your listeners too, will take that in whatever context it means to them. Right? Maybe it's their relationship with their parents or with a friend or whatever. It's we don't have as much as we think, especially in terms of time.
Right. And
you don't need to live as if today's your last day, right? Because then we do a lot of short-term thinking. But we need to be a little bit more focused that we may not have as long as we want. And nobody gets to make a bet with God, right? That they get to cheat all of those things because time is going to work on us all. So make your choice. And make the choice from your heart about what matters most, and then pursue that with vigor and passion and diligence, and then extraordinary things really start to happen. One of the precepts in the book, and we may talk about it in the beginning of the book with the lies, is this idea of the 80-20 principle. And I'm sure your listeners have been all over that.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about the 80-20 principle. I wanted you to really get into that.
Well, it's just this idea of at any given moment in time, there's always something that'll have the most impact. And so the 80-20 principle, and we could tell the backstory, Vilfredo Pareto, an Italian economist who looked up and saw that 80% of the wealth in Italy was held by 20% of the people. And over time, a number of people have written books, and a guy named Joseph Juran really popularized it during the industrial age. This idea that 20% of what you do, and the 20 is not necessarily always going to be there. It's the minority of what you do gets you the majority of what you want. And so identifying that 20%, and it could be the 10%. And in this case, we're saying, what is the one thing that gets you the most of what you want? And when you ask it that way, right, we have a question at the heart of the book. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything will be easier or necessary? When I ask people to ask that question for their marriage or their work, in my experience, most people already know the answer. They either haven't had it validated by someone else, like they don't feel completely confident in it, or actually they feel guilty for not doing it. And, like I remember we were working, on our marriage, and I remember the very first thing I did is I have to transition from work to home better.
Okay.
And my wife helped me really identify that as a problem point for her. I was coming home from work and I was staying at work too long. So I had to learn to transition faster so I could be present with my family.
Now, was this something, not to interrupt you, but was this something that you initially recognized, or was this something that was coming from your wife that was a concern, or is it something that you inherently just recognized by yourself?
To say that I recognized it by myself would give me way too much credit. My wife we have a very strong partnership. She's a businesswoman and an entrepreneur. We challenge one another, and I feel sure she got in my face and told me the honest truth, not in a yelling match or anything, just like, hey Jay, I've noticed this. We need to work on it because it's a problem.
Okay.
And we have that kind of relationship. But now, every year we go on a retreat at the end of the year. It's something we look forward to. We just do an overnight in a hotel locally. We don't even travel, but we get an overnight babysitter and we plan out our next year. And in the book on page 114, I have no idea where that is in your audiobook, but we talk about the 7 areas of your life where you apply the one thing: your spiritual life, your physical life, your key relationships, et cetera. And we kind of go through that. Like, what's our one thing for our relationship? And, that was one of the things that we focused on for a period of time. For me, it was transitioning. Today we have a date night. Every Wednesday night, we picked Wednesdays because we could reliably do it. Because if you pick Saturdays, you can't get a babysitter.
Right.
And if we wanted to have it, right, we wanted to make it repetitive and almost automatic, then we had to do it on a Wednesday night. And so, like, everybody in our world knows, hey, last night was date night. What'd y'all do?
Right.
And we've been doing that for years. So we just kind of pick a power habit in the areas that matter, and we make a stand around that thing.
Wow, that's great. No, that is good, and it's so important, especially you talk about those different areas in your life, spirituality and your marriage, and that's something that a lot of us, even myself, I have to work on, and my wife. And when you have all those different factors, and you have kids, you have your job, it's so important to continue to cultivate that marriage. So it's kudos to hear you on this podcast talk about that. You guys are really focused on having those retreats, and I like that. So it's right now, like, it's the end of 2015, right? So I really want to get into this next big idea that you guys really talked about, and everyone's thinking about goal setting.
Right.
Everyone's thinking about 2016 and approaching the end of the year, and you and Gary really talked about goal setting in a fascinating way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'll try to segue in a little bit of time blocking on this because I think they go hand in hand.
That's okay.
At one point I was trying to break down exactly how Gary went about setting his goals. He kept saying we have to work backwards. And you hear this phrase, and it's almost trite now because it's said a lot and most people don't understand it. Begin with the end in mind. And this idea, and I think it's very true, is that you go out about as far as you can envision your life and then work backwards. And so in the book, we talk about it as goal setting to the now. And here's why it's important. And then I'll walk you through really quickly how to do it. There's this economic concept, and it's very fancy sounding, but it actually makes a lot of sense. It's called hyperbolic discounting. And what it means is that the farther away a reward is in the future, the less power it has over us today. And they prove this all the time. Like, if I were to do it right now for all of your listeners, if we could magically do this live, say, I'll give you $100 today or $200 tomorrow, every single person would say, I'll take $200 tomorrow. I can wait a day for twice as much.
Right.
But if I change one thing, the time frame, to a year, it's exactly the opposite. I'll give you $100 today or $200 next year. Almost no one takes the $200.
I'm not waiting to it. Right.
But it's crazy. Show me any investment with no risk that my money doubles,
yes,
right?
Right.
Oh, and that's crazy. Economically, it makes no sense at all. But we play this game all the time. It's because we have this dream. I want to be a writer. I want to own my own business. I want to be a published novelist, whatever that is, right? And we know it's out there in the future. It doesn't actually have enough power to change our behavior today. Mm-hmm. So the way we frame it out is you start with your someday goal. I want to be a novelist, or I want to own my own business, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the question you would ask is, what's the one thing I would have to do in the next 5 years in order to feel like I was absolutely on track for that goal? And so you'd write that down. And by the way, everybody is guessing at this point. Nobody knows what they actually have to do. It's your best guess.
Right.
Then you roll backwards. So based on that, now you've got a framework, right? What would I have to accomplish in 1 year in order to feel like I was absolutely on track for that 5-year goal? And then people come up with their answer. And then you move backwards again, right? So now you look at the 1 year goal and say, based on my 1 year goal, what would I have to accomplish this month in order to feel like I was absolutely on track for that? Boom, you put that down. Well, one more time. What would I have to do this week to feel like I was on track for my monthly goal? And then you guessed it. What do I have to do today to feel like I'm absolutely on track for my week? Mm-hmm. Now, what happens is as you inch backwards, the thing that's actually in focus is your daily or your weekly goal. And that's going to have a lot of power to actually alter our behavior. It's directionally lined up with something that's so far in the future, you can't exactly predict when it's going to happen.
Right.
And that's the problem. We almost wrote about it in the book, this idea of low-hanging fruit, especially for entrepreneurs, right? We see this way to make money or to make progress, but because we don't stop to line up our dominoes, we actually might be going in the exact opposite direction, making plenty of money, but moving farther away from our ultimate goal.
Right.
So it's a really simple framework. It's a little bit methodical, 5 years, 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, 1 day. But when you get to that activity, well, then your only job is I open up my calendar. I say, I know what my one thing is to get me where I want to go way down the future. I'm going to start blocking time. I'm making appointments with myself to do that every day this week.
Right.
And the magic of just scheduling. I mean, I've been reading the book Better Than Before. And that's by Gretchen Rubin.
Okay.
And she talks about the magic of scheduling things. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most powerful ways to form a habit, just by setting an appointment on your calendar with yourself instead of someone else. So that's. Did I cover what you wanted me to cover?
Yeah, no, that was great. And I was thinking about too. And you mentioned the calendar, and I had a recent thought. Like I always, I used to have more of a challenge with goal setting because. I didn't really think, I used to think far ahead in advance, but then I would fluctuate between, short-term goals, long-term goals, but they weren't succinct. They weren't in sync with one another. And you mentioned the calendar, and it's something that I had a conversation with one of my coaching clients the other day is, we talked about to-do list, right? And there's this idea of doing to-do lists, but then if it's not on your calendar, then you won't do it. Nope. And I'm starting to do that now. And I've seen tremendous results where instead of just writing like a to-do list in my Evernote, which I still do, and I still do bullet points and I'm just an Evernote junkie. But now, I go right into my app and I use Sunrise as a calendar app. But if I have something to do tomorrow, whether it's, even picking up my son from aftercare or going to the cleaners, writing a new blog post, editing a podcast, working with one of my coaching and consulting clients, it is in my calendar as opposed to just being one off on a sheet of paper. So I was curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, I don't know who said this originally. It's not me, and I don't believe it's Gary, but if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Is a very strong way of saying that.
Right.
And that's, I think, it forces us to acknowledge the reality of limited time.
Right.
When we take our to-do list and say, how much time would I need to actually accomplish these goals? Where do I have that time available? It forces us to make some of those hard decisions with our time. And we need that extra help. But that simple framework is enough for a lot of people to do really extraordinary things. I've seen it happen again and again and again.
No, I totally agree. And I think this is a great transition into the principle and the premise of this show. And a lot of what my mission is now is really focusing on like our generation. And we have a lot of millennials and boomers listen to this show, but this show is a platform that, a lot of Gen Xers that are in our generation are dealing with goal setting, especially now, and multitasking. They're thinking about their financial security of their families. They're looking to build businesses. Let's talk about the principles of the one thing briefly, particularly, with respect to that Gen Xer mindset. So let's say, you have this, 35 to 50-year-old husband or wife or what have you that, they're tackling the day-to-day activities of their family. They are thinking about their financial security. They want to start a business. How does someone really navigate all these different distractions, but still be on target to reach their goals and apply those principles of the one thing as a Gen Xer?
Well, I think it begins with clarity. I mean, to me, when I looked at all the research that we read, it was mountains of white papers. It would make you cross-eyed. The thing that kind of unaligned it all with people who actually executed is they got very clear about what needed to happen, when it needed to happen, and why it was important to happen. And so if you described a lot of things, which probably resonate for a lot of people, I would say, why don't your first commitment be to block 2 or 3 hours this weekend or the next time that you can take and just have it for yourself. Talk to your spouse, arrange a babysitter for the kids if you're a single parent. Or if you don't have either of those, just schedule time to be alone with yourself with a journal and say, what are the things I feel truly obliged, like I can't avoid doing? I've got a mortgage to pay, or I've got school debt to pay off still. I've got a parent or a child to take care of. What are those things? And what are the things that I truly want to do? And then start prioritizing them. If I could only do one of these things and feel really good about my life, what would it be? And the moment we start to identify, look, you can get depressed looking at all the things, but the moment you start prioritizing them, you start to understand the ones that matter most to you. And so you can start giving them a little bit more of your time, and the ones that hopefully will have the greatest impact. You ask the question. So that's what I tell a lot of people to do is if you're not clear about where you're going and what needs to happen next, get your dominoes lined up as best you can. Reach out to some people that you think are maybe better at making that decision, a pastor, a mentor, and say, here's what I think my challenges are between me and what I want to have happen in my life. I think these are the priorities. What do you think? Get clear on it, because then you can start going down that path. And now you, at least if that doesn't work, you take number one, you throw it out the window and you go straight to your number 2 priority and see if that doesn't do better. But at least you've got your marching orders for quite some time.
No, I love that clarity and prioritization. I think that those are the 2 key things that you must embrace. And you talked a lot about, which I absolutely love, you like your relationship with your wife, Wendy, and you talk about, having those conversations with people that you trust. I'm assuming that, when it comes to goal setting, and especially as a Gen Xer, because many Gen Xers, are married or looking to be married, but on average, I feel that, having that communication with your spouse or significant other or whomever is so essential to really applying a lot of these principles in the book to make them successful, correct?
Absolutely. You need your running mate, your partner, to be on the same page.
Right.
Even if they're not even agreeing with everything, they have the right to be informed about where you're going with your life. You did make this promise to be together.
Right.
So communication is huge. And, we just had a webinar, and it's on YouTube now with a guy named John Howard. And I had made my one thing with my wife about communication. And he challenged my thinking on that and said it goes beyond that to just connection. And so now one of the things, and we both very self-consciously do it because we both listened to the same interview, we'll actually, when I come home, one of the first things I want to do with her and my kids is before I even ask, how was your day, honey? I give her a big old belly hug. And just a hug, and hold it longer than you feel comfortable holding it. And as John described to me, he goes, you watch it, at some point you're going to keep holding it thinking this is a little awkward, and then someone will just sigh. there's this physical release, and you're actually on a very subliminal level.
Right.
I mean, your reptile brain is saying, this person is completely safe. We are connected. And then the verbal communications are happening at a much higher level. My wife and family, I mean, if you want to know what my one thing is, professionally, it's books, it's writing, right? It's communication on that level for me.
Okay.
But if you look at my mission statement, it's to be the best father and husband I can be. And I got real clear that when push comes to shove, continually earning the respect of my spouse and living in integrity with my kids was what was going to motivate me when nothing else would. And that's a longer story to unwind. And it's very cheesy for a lot of people, but that's what motivates me, not money. As much as I value impact, at the end of the day, if I'm telling my kids to live and do their best all the time, and I'm not in integrity. If I'm taking the respect of my wife for granted, I'm not in integrity, and that is devastating to me. And I think when people get their clarity, ask, why is all this important to me? What is it that's really under it all? And don't really question the answer. Whatever it is that truly motivates you. I mean, I just confessed mine. Some people will think it's all warm and fuzzy, and some people will gag. I get that. But it's about my wife and my kids.
Right.
And for me. And when you know that and they know that, everything becomes turbocharged.
Wow. No, I love everyone. Did you hear that? Everyone should have a mission statement. I mean, all of you that are listening in, especially, not just Gen Xers, but any of you listening in, and Jay, your mission statement was what you have clarity, and you said it without hesitation, and everyone should have that one thing. I can talk to you for another hour, man, but I know we got to wrap up, but this has been, I feel like I got my own special edition of the one thing just on this interview. This has been so great, but we're going to wrap up, but I have two questions that I always like to ask all the guests on the end of the show, and you're not going to get away from it, Jay. But I know
I get the first one. All right, go ahead.
All right, no worries. It's pretty easy. But number one, so if there was a song that would play every time you entered a room, Jay, or when you walk down the street, that fits you, the story, your story, and the brand of Jay Papasan, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song, and why that song?
Okay, this question was torture for me because music to me sets my mood. It's the background. I love it. It's the background of my life.
Me too, man.
But it doesn't define being. I've never thought of it that way. It's like, what's your favorite book? I mean, I've got so many favorite books. It's so hard for me to answer that question. But here's what I'll tell you. I had to do this. I had to give a speech. And they said, you have to have a theme music and you have to have 15 seconds.
Okay.
And I chose the first 15 seconds of a Beastie Boys song called Sabotage.
Wow.
And that's a Gen X classic, in my opinion. It was right there when I was, the Beastie Boys, when I was coming out of high school. And whenever I hear those opening riffs of that song, I get a very happy feeling. I get energy. I get revved up. And it reminds me of being with my closest friends and having a lot of fun. So I don't know what that says about me. The song is called Sabotage. Maybe it's not about the lyrics, but the music and what it brings me back to. I'm a deeply nostalgic person. And that, I don't know. So that's my answer. But boy, I struggled with that exercise.
No, I love it. I actually, that was pretty cool. Sabotage. You took me back. You're right. That is a Gen X class. I can't stand it. I know you planned it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to set it straight.
I just remember thinking that was and they're all kind of nerdy. They were cool, but nerdy. Man. And I definitely was a nerd that kind of wanted to be kind of cool.
Oh, we all love the Beastie Boys, man. The Beastie Boys.
It works in a lot of ways the more I think about it.
No, that was pretty cool. That's a pretty cool selection. We all love the Beastie Boys. If you are a Gen Xer, if you don't know the Beastie Boys, then there's something wrong with you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm definitely just kidding. All right. That was pretty cool. I got to dig that up after this call now. So second question. So this is more of a value bomb question, but if there was one specific tool, Jay, or resource, it could be an app, a website, a book, other than the one thing that you recommend to Gen Xers who want to be a stronger leader or start a business, or just, I guess in general, just become a better leader, what would it be?
The first thing I thought of when I saw this question was get a coach.
Okay.
And I have one, my wife has one, Gary Keller has one. I mean, and people are like, you pay for a coach? You've got Gary Keller. And it's been a real journey. I resisted it for a long time. But in the course of writing this book, I mean, I read a study that was replicated, and it was of professionals. It wasn't of grad students or anything like that, but people who had regular accountability. And it was a very low form of accountability. I think they had to do an email progress report every week to someone that was their accountability partner. They were 76.7% more likely to achieve their goals. And I saw that and I said, well, I'm just an idiot for not doing this. And so for the last, 40 years, I've had a personal coach. I get on the phone with Glenn every other week for an hour, and we get right to the heart of the matter. And his job is to challenge me to ask bigger questions of my life. And it's been a wonderful relationship. So coach would be my number one thing. And then I immediately thought, there's like half your people going, I can't afford a coach. So I'll give you the cheap version, and it's the total non-techie. Go get a month at a glance paper calendar.
Okay.
I found that transformative for me. I love my iPhone, and I'm going to get one of the new ones that just came out today.
Oh yeah, are you an Apple guy?
Oh, I'm an Apple guy.
I am an Apple geek. Oh, I watched the key. Well, when this comes out, this will be old news, but in a couple of weeks. But no, I cannot wait. I
always block off my lunch so I can watch that live. I'm a goober that way.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: there's nothing against technology,
right?
But there is a calm that comes from looking at something that has been written by hand. And the bigger your goals are, the bigger your perspective on time needs to be. And even a computer screen, the month at a glance, is not very powerful. So I keep my Outlook, I keep all of those appointments and my Google Calendar, all of that stuff. That's all out there because that's life, right? We set appointments, we email them to each other. My calendar is for my big things. How many writing days do I have this month? When are my key vacations? When are the anniversaries and birthdays of the people that I care about most, right? What are the big things in my life? When is our goal setting retreat? And so I only use it for a couple of big things, usually time off and the time that I spend most importantly working on my business, which is when I'm writing, and then planning time. So there's only a few things I actually put on that calendar. But when people ask me, to say, when can we get together? I actually like to look at that first, because I'll look at the scope of time. And I'll give you an example. I got an invitation to be at a publishing conference called Book Expo in New York that has been like a lifelong dream for me just to get to attend, much less to be in a booth and kind of on stage. And I immediately said, absolutely, absolutely. Let me just check my calendar. I'll get right back to you. And the dates of the event spoke nothing to me. But when I looked at my calendar, I realized because of a weird school quirk, we were going to celebrate my son's birthday 2 weeks early. And if I had said yes, I would have missed my son's birthday party, which would have been a crime.
Right.
And I just got this bigger perspective on time. And it's happened to me so many times where I want to say yes to something and I'll look and go, if I keep saying yes to stuff, I'm going to have no writing days left this month. And it gives me a big perspective on time. And I was, again, very hesitant, just like with a coach, to adopt that. But I started looking at all the millionaires that I knew, and I'm like, the multimillionaires, not the new millionaires, the people who are making like $100 million a year, they're using paper calendars, a lot of them. And they're wanting a big perspective on time. So I thought, you know what? I'll at least start with doing it their way before I veto it. And I've stuck with it now for almost 7 years.
Now, I will double down and on that. Those are some great resources. I mean, first, just quickly taking a step back, the coach. I think coaching is so important. And to your point, a lot of us may feel that we can't afford a coach, but it could be somebody that could be in your inner circle that could give you just some valuable consultation. You don't have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but if you can afford it, I think having a coach is important. And the calendar, I tell you, I'm looking right now in my office in my 2015 yearly, like the kind you put on your wall. I got that last year. It's with dry erase markers. It's so important. But I love the month at a glance calendar. And, like you said, we all love our digital products, but it's nothing beats that analog, tangible I think it does. I think for me, it does. It makes me a little bit more cognizant of like what I really need to do. Because I feel like
you see the connections.
Exactly. Yeah. When it's digital, it's not at your fingertips. It's just out there. And sometimes it feels it's not even real. But when you write it down and you can feel it and touch it, it's real. So I love that you brought that up.
I think I was talking to the podcaster Pat Flynn.
Oh, Pat. Yes, I know Pat.
I was on a conversation with him earlier this week, and I think it was him. He was telling me that he has like a whole wall that's now a calendar. Yes. And he just got like a giant calendar.
Yeah, Pat has this really cool, funky, like crazy office that he just built in his house. So I could see that. It's probably lit up with like.
But I immediately got this vision, right, of this like 9x14 calendar. I thought that would be so awesome.
Oh yeah.
I could see like this year and next year.
Right. No, I love it.
And really start planning out like, when the big stuff would happen. So it's all about your perspective on time. And that's been the theme of our conversation for me. Mm-hmm. It's your most precious resource, and how we invest it matters a lot.
It is. Jay, it has been definitely a pleasure chatting with you. I tell you, I have advocated this book all year since I've read it, since I've listened to it. And for all of you listening out there, if this book is not on your bookshelf or on your computer or on your mobile device as an audiobook, you are leaving success in your life on the table, believe me. And I hope that this conversation with Jay really inspired you to think about, to not think about all those other things, and to focus a little better. I mean, it takes work. Sometimes it's not easy, but I think I know this book will be a helpful guide for you. So Jay, tell everybody the best way they can find out more about you, the things that you have planned, and how they can connect with you.
The1thing.com with the number one thing.com has almost everything about this book, and links from there to my social media and how to contact me for, speeches and everything else. But I try to remain accessible through those channels and personally respond to Facebook and Twitter messages. That's how we connected. I see that as it's kind of one of the things I get energy from.
Right.
When you're writing in a cave all day, it's nice to hear from your readers every now and then. So I would welcome that.
Awesome. And everybody, when you go to the1thing.com, close out all the other tabs in your browser because you have to focus on the one website. I'm guilty of that, man. I have like 10 tabs sometimes up on my computer. Good deal. This has been a lot of value. Now I'm going to go and cross out the 15 things I wrote down on my to-do list for today. And this has been great. It's been an honor for me because I'm a big fan of your work and your book. And I'm so proud of what you've done. Thanks so much, Jay, for hanging out with us today.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Take care. Okay, again, and it still sounds just as valuable as it did the first time, just as valuable and applicable. My chat and conversation and interview with Jay Papasan, co-author of this wonderful book titled The One Thing, co-written along with Gary Keller. This book, I tell you, this book literally changed my life. And I still refer back to it. I mean, it's highlighted and underlined, and I keep it in my office, and I still go to this book to encourage me and to motivate me when I'm trying to do too many things at once and I can't seem to get traction. This book is helpful to remind me that I need to take a step back, ask myself that focusing question. What is the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be made easier or unnecessary? Okay. So I encourage you to pick up this book. The One Thing is everywhere in all the bookstores and on Amazon. And I tell you, it will change your life. All right. So thank you as always for listening to the episode. And remember to go over to genxamplify.com to get the full show notes and to listen to all those other episodes that you may have missed, or that you may want to listen to again, and also don't forget to download and subscribe to the podcast so you can listen to it on the go through your favorite mobile device and your favorite podcast app. All right. And also definitely go over to my personal website at adrianporter.com to learn more about me and how I can help you build a powerful personal brand and also help you with any consulting or speaking or any of your needs. But anyway, just go over and check it out and you can learn more about me. And as always, you've been listening to Gen X Amplified, the premier podcast dedicated to help you, Gen Xers, unlock your inner power so you can maximize your impact and succeed in life. Remember, this is more than a podcast. This is a movement. Take care.